So hello and welcome. My name is Steve Pugh. I traditionally do something called a growth strategy podcast where I introduce you to interesting people that can help your business or career. Today is no different, but between now and the 3rd of December, probably a little bit afterwards as well, you'll see that I'm supporting heavily something called Purple Sock Day. And what we wanted to do was both give you inspirational content from amazing entrepreneurs and different people that you can learn from, but also just a blatant plug to go out and buy some socks, some really lovely, beautiful socks for £6. But actually the chap that makes these socks and a whole range of bamboo related clothing is actually David, who I'm going to introduce you to today. So David is actually a friend of a friend. So Andrew Douglas, who was a guest last week, I think it was. And actually, this is a topic that I'm really passionate about. And hopefully the interview today combines both the entrepreneurship angle on David's story and how he went from school and went all the way through to do what he does now, but also then going on to how and why he decided to support Purple Sock Day and what Andrew and the guys at Parallel Lifestyle are looking to do. And if you're inspired by any of this and you want to help out as well, basically you can buy some lovely socks using the links which are all around me, including on the stream just down there. And actually, this guy is the guy that runs the company that makes them as well. So hopefully today will be really interesting. And if you join us for the next kind of 30-40 minutes, it should be a really good conversation as well. So David, how is your Thursday going?
Hi Steve, lovely to meet you, and thanks for inviting me on. Very well. I've been productive this morning, you might say.
Good.
It's not always the case.
I think people often forget that you see so much stuff on like hustle culture from entrepreneurs and things that you do, but not every day is 100 miles an hour. And sometimes it's nice to have a regular speed day. And sometimes when you just tick a big bucket list tick thing, achievement task off your list, it can be really cool. And then also I'd like to congratulate you on some extremely comfortable socks. I have in my possession probably about 6 different pairs. I actually wore some last night for basketball training. But you make
Brilliant.
a great product.
Thanks for that.
But as someone who, so I run my own business and I run other people's businesses as well. But for anyone that makes a physical product, especially something which involves stock and design and trends and seasons and supply chain, and people don't always appreciate how much exponentially harder it gets the more complicated your supply chain is. And we'll dive into that a bit later. But it was just one of those things that as an entrepreneur, I respect that because I understand how difficult it is. That it makes kind of what I do seem really easy, that I just live stream and have one product and it kind of works.
Well, who's the smart one here then? It's
No, cool. So one of the things I always love to do is, would you be happy to give a quick kind of 30-60 second intro, just who you are, where you're from?
So my name's David Gordon. I spent most of my adult life living in London. I've been between Plymouth and London for many, many years, and I'm now sitting in a cottage ever since the last 4 or 5 months. I've been living in mid Devon, so I'm really enjoying that. I started BAM about 17 years ago. I've never really had a proper job or very short stints. I would say. Yeah, I'm consistently inconsistent, and sometimes have a bit of inspiration. And I suppose if you're going to sum it up, I just try and make the world a better place. And I know that sounds very kind of kumbaya, but that really gives me a kick, trying to, in my little corner of the world, trying to make the world a better place and spreading a bit of positive vibes. That's what I try and do.
I think that is a great motto to live by. That I think for a lot of people, that when you first start your career and you build a family and you build a foundation, the challenge is, and it rightly should be, to get to a point where you're self-sufficient, you can pay your bills, you can feed your family, you have your heating, lighting, everything, and then you have your career ambitions. But you get to a certain point where actually money isn't necessarily the driver anymore. But actually then, at least for me, so I turned 40 earlier this year, the ability to have and give back and actually make that a key part of your being and what you do and how you exist and the causes that you want to support. I personally find it funny that I always want to do more, but I also need to sometimes rein myself back in that you can only do so much. So when you said about the corner of your world kind of thing, I get that, but I appreciate that.
Mm.
Now,
But
what?
if everybody does that, then every corner of the world becomes a better place. And there's some really interesting stuff out there actually about the impact of a very, very small number of people
Mm-hmm,
on the wider population. There's been all sorts of experiments with meditation and literally sending out positive vibrations into the world, and the dramatic impact that has on the crime rate in the local area, for
wow.
example. I mean, this has been measured. It's not just a kind of an airy fairy thing. It's a scientific fact, and so it's a really good thing to remember. What you put out
Mm-hmm.
into the ether has an impact.
The one thing that gets me, and I don't want to go too much off tangent, is that still nobody knows what consciousness is, and if that is something which we each have, or is it a universal thing that we tap into, which goes into what you're saying, that actually the answer is we don't know. But my point is that
I would guess that it's both.
yeah, but the point is that I genuinely find it interesting that um and likewise, as you go through your life and career, you tend to, at least I do, gravitate to people with similar values as you do, which I think is really interesting as well.
Mm,
One thing I
yeah.
just want to throw out as well, I'm just going to click on this screen. Hopefully I don't ruin anything. Thank you to the guys who are watching across all the different channels. We broadcast on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, Instagram, lots of different places. And if you comment as well, it does come up on my screen. So thanks to the guys that kind of comment as well. I just wanted to, I forgot to say it before, but no, it's cool. So David, where did you grow up?
So I grew up in a place called Leatherhead, which is about 7 o'clock on the M25 around London.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in a kind of, I guess it was Greenbelt. I was pretty lucky, I think, in where I grew up. I had a lot of freedom. Obviously, I was a child of the 70s. I'm 55 now, so uh, I grew up wild and free, and thanks to my mum, she really let me run wild,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm forever grateful to her. So, yeah, it was a great place to grow up. Yeah.
Because do you think the world's changed? So I'm a child of the 80s, but I also grew up in a semi-rural place that actually, as kids, once we were probably 12, 13, we were allowed on our bikes to just go as far as we want, like within reason. And it was just, there's a wonderful sort of spirit of adventure that you can develop when you do that. That as things developed into like the 90s and 2000s, a lot of the literature says that a lot of parents got a lot more protective and they didn't let their kids go out and make mistakes as much, which actually you worry, will that impact, creativity and freedom and adventure in the future? But I'm interested in your thoughts.
100%, 100%. You've got to let people uh, grow up falling out of trees, scraping their knees, getting it wrong, because that's how you develop your own personal risk assessment
Mhm.
program. If you don't do all of that stuff and have the freedom to do all of that stuff when you're young, then you're never going to develop that risk assessment program for yourself. And so, and apart from that, that is what life is all about. It's all about being free and going out and doing whatever it is that drives you, and what you're passionate about, and the stuff, whatever you want to get up to,
Mhm.
get out there and do it. And yeah, I completely agree. We need to be, we're all free beings, and I do look at society now, and I think, God, everything is so kind of controlled and cosseted, and but in comparison to the childhood that I had.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I agree. We need a bit more of that.
I think it's a British thing as well. Is that it's that spirit of adventure. I think we all get from, especially boys from Bond films. You just want to go out and shoot stuff and do things, and it's anyway. It is what it is. Can I ask what you were like at school? Because one of the things that you often see, because I do this quite a lot, where I speak to a lot of different people.
Mm.
Often entrepreneurs have similar traits, and I'm just interested to see what you were like character-wise. Did you play any sport? Did you get into trouble? That kind of thing.
Um, yeah, I did actually all of those things. I was actually quite naughty. I it was never evil or ill-intended, but it was I would I would describe it as high spirits. And so yeah, and I was a jack of all trades, in sports, but yeah, I'd get up to all sorts, and hilariously so sometimes. Um, I mean, God, yeah, I'll give you one quick example just to kind of paint a picture. So we had a new art block in our school. I was about 11. We had a new art block, and I'd been sent out of class for being naughty. So I was standing in the corridor, and the corridor was it must have been 5 feet wide or something like that. And I figured out that you could put your hands on one side of one wall and your feet on the other, and you could go up. So, well, I thought, because we played around with this before, and I thought, I had time on my hands, so I thought, let's see how high I can get. And so I went all the way up until I was in the rafters, and I was hidden in the rafters. This is probably only about 15 feet up. And then just as I got to the top, just as my bum kind of kissed the ceiling, the headmaster walked in with some people that he was showing around. And because it was a new art block, they were stood directly underneath me and he was showing off and he was waxing lyrical about this bloody art block. And I was like about to explode because A, it was really exciting. And B, I was like, I just had to stay very, very quiet. And C, the longer he was going on, I was starting to shake. And eventually they wandered off, and I managed to kind of get about a third of the way down, and then I had to jump because but and I got away with it. I got no, he didn't find out, and so it was that sort of stuff that I was up
Yeah.
to, and I was just it was just high spirits and but yeah, I love my sport as well, and football and cricket, and I got into rugby as well when I was a bit older, and all that stuff.
Because
Yeah,
also
loved it,
you'd be
loved
surprised
it.
about how many people, like, it's a hugely high percentage that aren't afraid to challenge authority. I was the same. One of the big ones. So the school I went to was called Marycourt Catholic High School, and it was still run by nuns. And we had, if you remember them back in the day, they were wooden desks that folded up, and they were probably themselves 30 years old, 50 years old.
Mm,
And I remember
mm,
there was a guy called Anthony Gallagher once. We'd been told off. We were on detention, so we had to stay back one night. So we moved all of these identical desks around the classroom just because we could. We didn't tell anyone. So when all of the year eights came in the next day, we were like year 9, year 10. All of their stuff was in the wrong place. And to us, it was just the high spirits kind of stuff. But I think some people just have it. And again, even with sports, it's almost, it's the competition element. So I love being part of a team, but
mm,
actually part of me just wants to win as well. And you often find that with business people, when you get the combination of different things, often you don't just accept the status quo, because often entrepreneurism is about, okay, so that's how it's currently done, but I think it could be done better. But then
mm.
also, nobody goes into business to come 27th. You often want to make it viable because the other 26 are trying to put you out of business. And often you do see these kind of same traits. So what did you leave school at 15, 16, or did you go to university, or?
No, what I did, from the age of about 10, I had this thing in my head about doing PE and sports science at Loughborough University, and I had
Same.
had a real thing about it, and so I wanted to do that. So I worked hard at my O levels and knuckled down a little bit, to be honest with you, and then got through my A levels okay, and went to Loughborough. So that was my driving force in my
Wow.
70s, to go on that course, and so that's where I ended up, and I had a lovely time at Loughborough.
And for anyone
Yeah.
that doesn't know, that might not be UK based, or even if you are international or otherwise, Loughborough is pretty much the best sports university in the country. Often, if you play for GB or whichever, you go to a sports based university generally. But actually, since then, it's evolved and it's got a really great engineering department. But actually, it is the place to go if you're really, really good at something. If you want to take that almost professionally, so I respect that. It was always on my list, but at the time, at the age, I wasn't that good to. I didn't want to go to Loughborough and be in the fifth team basketball, so I went to somewhere else to do
Yeah,
better. So out of interest,
sure.
so what did you do afterwards? What was your first job?
Well, I when I finished at Loughborough, I wanted to go travelling. Um, so I went off for about 3 years, backpacking and working and traveling. I worked in Australia and Japan and a couple of other places, and traveled around Asia and Australia, New Zealand, and a little bit of America. And I really, really love traveling.
Wow.
And so I did that, and I really got into that. In fact, I've only had two jobs. One of them was I was a gym instructor in Melbourne in a hotel gym there, and then when I came back from traveling, I got a job at Trailfinders,
Yep, I know it.
selling round the world tickets to probably people like me who were willing to do it next. And I did that for about 6 or 7 months, and that was my limit really. I just I wasn't really born to do that. I think
Hmm.
I've always had little business ideas, and when stuff runs around your head, and you think, oh, maybe I should have a go at that. Or I just I didn't I suppose the truth of it is I didn't like the constraints of a job.
Hmm.
I'd be prepared to work a lot harder doing my own thing than in a job. It just wasn't
Yeah,
for
yeah.
me.
But that's almost like from before. I think you have that or you don't. So it's but then for me that comes back to the rebellious nature at school. Is always and these where you see the common traits that come in. Um,
Mm.
so
But
what
I
happened?
think I think also, sorry, Steve, but I think also, if someone's listening to this and thinking, well, I didn't do that, or I didn't feel that way, that doesn't necessarily mean, you can anybody can have a thought process, and literally anybody can be successful
Hmm.
should they choose to. And I think that's a really important point to make. It's I suppose there are classic traits that you can identify that maybe you haven't, but I think anybody, it's a choice.
Hmm.
It is a choice, and you can choose to, and you might not succeed first time, or even second time. I mean, I've had so many failures, um, but I didn't have any. I personally didn't have any other choice. In the end, I kind of ran out of ways to screw up. Probably is the truth of it, and so that was my path. But smarter people don't necessarily have to mess up quite as many times as I did. Um, Before finally figuring out how not to mess up. So yeah, I think anybody can do it.
Because sorry, I went out of focus just in case you were. It's the one of the problems. It's a first world problem about this studio. But no, I completely agree. And again, I think the definition of success has changed. And for me, that ties into what your whole brand ethos is about. And we're going to get onto that later. But if you go back to 80s films, it was all Wall Street and Porsche 911s and, whatever. And even
Yeah,
in
yeah.
some
Gordon
ways,
Gekko, Greed is Good, and all that
yeah.
stuff.
And then
Yeah,
even now with Instagram and lots of different things, there's a whole culture where it's Lamborghinis. It's a similar drive. But one of the things that in the real world that I've found is success can be a part-time job which allows you to travel or paint or look after your kids or just do something which you enjoy. And you mentioned just before we came actually on air, it was to do with how I'm lucky because in some ways I get to make my hobby work, if that makes sense. But it
yeah,
was just the principle of with a lot of people, me included, you can see people online that do stuff and you're like, well, why are they more successful than I am? And it gets to you. And, it's almost everyone has their own different price to pay and what they want to do and what makes them happy. And I do think that uh, different things mean different people, different things to different people.
yeah. No, completely, completely. And it's not about making loads of money and trampling on other people. It's just not about that. Um, it's about for me, it's about freedom. I mean, that's what it's about for me. It's being free to do what I want to do. I mean, some people like tinkering with engines and what have you. I like tinkering with business and shaping something that works. And so that's, I suppose, that's all pointing me in that one direction. But it's about being free and finding the things that float your boat and pursuing those things. Because like you said, this is your job and your hobby. And that's real success. That is real success. If you're doing something that you really love to do, that's it. That is it. And it's nice to have a bit of security and a roof over your head. Of course it is. But because you spend most of your hours doing whatever it is you're going to do, so you better enjoy it. Otherwise, I mean, and there's obviously a discipline, and it's not always going to be brilliant times. You have to apply yourself, but if you can enjoy that bit in whatever it is you're doing, then that's success.
So I've got to ask, so at what point did you I tell you what, do you want to tell people about BAM, what you do, what the business is, that kind of thing?
Yeah, sure.
And then I'll jump into how did you get the idea?
Yeah, sure. So BAM is bambooClothing.co.uk. It's a clothing brand using primarily bamboo as a raw material. And we also, being a bit of merino and a bit of organic cotton, there has to be an environmental element to whatever we do. And we make for men and for women, performance clothing, sports clothing, yoga in particular, and Pilates, also outdoorsy clothing, running, walking, base layers, but also everyday stuff. Because the thing about bamboo is it's incredibly comfortable. It's really soft. It's really comfortable. It's a fantastic gifting thing. Christmas is a huge thing for us. And yeah, so that's what we do. And I've been doing that for 17 years. And I started with just a little collection of men's and women's t-shirts. Because I was skin when I started the business. I really was skin. And it's built up over the years to quite a large range, and our revenues are about £20 million now, and it's really grown into something that I'm really proud of. So yeah, I'm delighted with how it's gone. I finally found a way not to screw things up.
Well, yet you can still screw it up, but just turn it.
Yeah.
So at what point did you get the itch to think, you know what, I want to try this?
Well, so my journey was, after I came back from traveling, I started a business which was promotional clothing, printing and what have you. I did that for about 10 years because I was doing it alongside my rubbishy, pathetic pole vaulting career. Obviously, I wasn't good enough to get paid to do it, but I wanted to do it anyway in a sort of fairly full-time way. So I had this business called TSF Clothing, which was providing printed T-shirts and etc. Then I stopped pole vaulting when I was about 33, and about a year later, I thought, yeah, this actually is not really a business I want to. It's not. There's got to be something better out there than this, and also. And so I kind of walked away from TSF. I kind of sold it quite cheaply to a pal of mine who was working with me. And I just thought there's got to be, for me personally, I mean, he's made a great success of it. I mean, he's, that was his journey. But for me, I just thought there's got to be something better out there for me personally. And also, I wanted to make a point, because in my previous business, it was business to business, and I saw firsthand the kind of the psychopathic nature of business, bigger businesses especially, and how they dealt and how they operated. And of course, that's not the whole business world. It's just not. But my window on it at that time, I just saw it and I just thought, there's a better way of doing it than this. So I wanted to make a point that you could have success doing something that was good, and I wanted to do something environmental,
Hmm.
um, and that you could make it successful and doing everything right, treating people right, doing everything right. And obviously, I'd come from the clothing world, and so that was my ecosystem. And I was in China doing some. Uh, I was making some baby wear for a friend of mine as a favor, and I came across bamboo clothing as a concept. And I just thought, you know what, this is ticking all of my boxes. I found it a really interesting thing, and thought, right, I'm going to have a go at this. So, so that was I was about 37 at that point, and 36 was it? So yeah, that's where I got the idea from. And there was a guy doing it in California, but apart from that, there was no one else doing it outside of China. So
Wow.
there were no supply routes. Setting up the supply route was from scratch was kind of kind of interesting. I wouldn't
What
want to have
kind
to
of
do that
year was
again.
this?
Well, I launched BAM in June 2006.
Oh, cool.
Uh,
So it's like 2 years before the global recession, which affected
yeah,
everyone.
but you know what? It didn't have any. I didn't even notice it.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
It's funny actually because I was living and working in Jamaica at the time in
oh yeah,
construction, and basically
right.
construction tanked when because a lot of people invested in speculative projects that it just flatlined.
Mm,
But what I find fascinating is almost that it's the link between your youthful exuberance traveling, where often you described a lot of hot places. But the point is, people always say that when you start a business, it's really good to understand the consumer. And arguably, you were your own consumer, if that makes sense. You understood the
mm.
market and traveling and the buyers, which I think is really kind of cool. And then as you kind of went through, how early on was it a conscious thing that now, and arguably for the past kind of 10 years, I say like ESG and eco credentials is huge now. But I
Mm.
imagine it hasn't always been, but for you, was it always part of the key kind of pitch?
Yeah, it was. It was because the clothing industry is, after oil, it's the most polluting industry. I mean, it's the the damage that the clothing industry does is massive, and I wanted to do my bit to show raise the bar, I
Yeah,
suppose
yeah.
you would say, in my own small little way, raise the bar and say, look, you can do this, and you can make it work, and you can make it successful, and going back to the point that I wanted to make. And so we've, from conception, really tried to do our bit, and every single step of the process, because historically, it's a bamboo viscose, and viscose historically has not been a clean fabric to make, and we've worked with world leading companies to help further that agenda, and
Mm-hmm.
to help clean that up with closed loop water supply, and various different ways, and just to show a better way of doing things.
Because I
Um,
know you're very proud of the maxim about leave no trace behind. I was in Cubs and Scouts growing up. I used to spend a lot of time outdoors and camping, and especially if you go wild camping, you don't want to leave anything that wasn't there before you started.
yeah, clean up after yourself. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But
it's a
what,
good principle.
but I can imagine that also caused some challenges over the years where it's a brilliant ambition to have.
Mm.
But again, when you're competing against people that don't follow the same moral ethos, I can imagine at times it was difficult. Where do you make decision A or decision B? And it was almost, but I empathize and respect that because actually it kind of been easy.
Well, when you have a certain resource and that resource isn't very much, you you have to be pragmatic. You've got to do what you can do, and actually, the more we've grown, we're probably in a really good sweet spot at the moment. We're big enough to have the resource to really pay attention to
Hmm.
these things, much more than I was able to. I mean, I
Yeah.
picked bamboo because of the growth patterns of bamboo, and you know, it started off by its very nature as a winning product environmentally. There was the question mark over the viscose production. As we've grown, we've enabled ourselves to really just go so far beyond
Hmm.
that part of the debate in terms of our impact positive program and what we're doing. We're just so far beyond that. You know, our brand DNA, so we can trace it back. You know, we trace our products back to our supplier.
Got you.
You know, all the way back, and you can't do that as a one-man band. When I started off, there's
Hmm.
just no way I could have done that. But I started off on solid ground, I suppose, initially. But I think it gets more difficult the bigger. Like if you're an Adidas,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
say, it 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 must get much more complicated because of the number of factories that you're dealing
Hmm.
with. But it's still doable. I mean, it is doable. We've done it with our resource, so it is absolutely doable. Um, but yeah, it's sometimes you have to be pragmatic and um, do what you can do, and there's an honesty in there. You know, there's a realness to that reality, and being open about it. You know,
No.
we're doing everything we can, and we're now able to do an awful lot. But
And
there is one point. There is one point I would like to make, um, because I like to make it at every opportunity. Is after spending the last few years tens of thousands of pounds offsetting carbon,
hmm.
so that we're carbon neutral, and being irritated by climate change deniers, I've now come to the conclusion, having looked at the evidence, that the man-made climate change is a massive scam, a humongous scam, and so we won't be spending another penny on offsetting carbon footprint because it's a scam, and I will tell everybody that will listen it's a scam, and actually the science behind showing that it's a scam is astonishingly simple and quick.
Okay.
So I make that point everywhere I go because it's only by people staying silent about it because it's a bit awkward that this scam has been allowed to continue. So slightly awkward, but I don't care. That's my firm understanding, having looked at the science. So I'll mention that everywhere I go to anyone that will listen.
Because out of interest, the what in particular do you feel is like the magic bullet either way? Because don't get me wrong. So there's loads of evidence over the last. We're going well off topic, but I'm quite enjoying it, so it's fine. Over the
It's a
past
fascinating
millions
topic,
of
and
years,
the wider discussion that entails is
but
also pretty interesting.
but it's how like it only happens every 100 million years or so, but the actual polarity of the entire planet changes every so often. But you have seasonal before humans ever the Industrial Revolution. You had
Mm.
changing climates and you had lots of different things, and I kind of get it. What I'm interested though is just with, I won't speak for you, but a lot of people, especially if they have a brand which aligns to a certain value, which you definitely 100% do, would choose to stay quiet on the related issue. And I'm just intrigued, is it a trust, a credibility, just a personal passion of why you share the
Uh,
narrative around I like it, it's
you mean
brave.
about man-made climate
Yes.
change?
Yeah. The
Uh,
reason why I say that is because a lot of your customers
mm.
might feel different, and I'm not
and
backing
and
either
I
way.
and I and I understand that, and I mean, I for about 15 years, I used to get irritated by climate change deniers. I thought, God, you, you, the time for talk is over. Now is the time for action,
Hmm.
and so with a bit of humility, that I actually reviewed the evidence only within the last 12 months,
Okay.
and come to the conclusion that and that it comes in a wider context as well. So if it's a scam, who's behind that scam, and what's that all about? And that's a much bigger debate that we probably haven't got time for. But it's very, very simple. The science behind it is actually very, very simple. It's to do with ice core samples, and it turns out that they can measure temperature and CO2
Yep.
content very, very accurately all around the world. And it turns out that CO2 levels follow temperature changes by 600 to 800 years. And that's because it's the ocean's ability to hold CO2 changes with temperature, but because the oceans are so deep, it takes that long for that impact to happen. And there's lots of other things as well in terms of where we are in a bigger cycle. It's to do with the sun. It's to do with the weakening magnetosphere at the moment. You know, the temperatures are changing on other planets and moons of other planets in the solar system more than they are here on Earth, actually. And so it's just a natural cycle that's been captured, if you like, by powerful financial interests. But the reason why I bring it up, even though it's awkward, and even though from personal experience, I know that some people will listen to this and think, possibly be slightly irritated, because that's how I used to be.
But the
so
thing
I
is,
totally understand that. But
I
the reason why I bring it up,
genuine debate, because like
yes,
some people,
we should be able to discuss, and the fact that it's awkward to discuss, there's your first clue that something's not right.
Because as an engineer, for me it's always about data and, you know, that kind of thing. I obviously have opinions, but the point is I like debate. So even though a lot of people hate Piers Morgan, he does have on conflicting guests because he wants to hear from the Israelis and the Palestinians and challenge whichever. But the one thing that I was thinking about at the weekend, and this might sound random, as an engineer, I know how hard it is to make stuff and make a change, to make something happen. And what crossed my mind, because we had really bad rain in Newcastle over the weekend, was if you flip the switch, and like I've traveled quite a lot and the world is massive. If you actually tried on purpose to change the climate and you went absolute batshit, I think you would struggle. But my point is, and it's that kind of thing of where some people would hate that I even said that, but just from an engineering point of view, I think it would be very, very difficult to do, even if you tried to do it on purpose, to change the climate by 3 degrees, 5 degrees, you know, if you think about how big the world is. But regardless,
it's an interesting point, and there's actually, I mean, this is a huge topic, and you're right. I agree. We should be able to talk about it. But the reason why I mention it and I bring it up, because it's even though it's awkward, and even though, you know, as the founder of an eco-friendly clothing company, that could be potentially problematic. I think it's too important not to raise the issue and to talk about it, because we cannot be led down the garden path as we are at the moment as humanity, and that's what's happening, and it has to stop. And that's more important than any old business that someone might own.
I was going to say another trait of entrepreneurs is free thinkers. I don't mind if someone convinces me otherwise. Just convince me. Is the truth. So back to the main topic of today. How did you get involved with both Andrew Douglas and Purple Sock Day?
Well, I've known Andrew for many years. He's a dear friend, and when he came up with the concept, and we discussed it, it was clear that I could help with the production of the socks. You know, we've if anybody's ever received a pair of bamboo socks through the post, that will have been me. We send out, or we have sent out over the years, about 1 million pairs of socks a year. We've stopped doing that now because it doesn't work financially anymore, because there's been a bit of a cost of living thing going on, but we sent out a lot of socks, and so we do make a lot of socks, and we make really good socks from bamboo, and so it was the obvious matchup, and it was exciting for me because, you know, the world that Andrew, I call him Dougie, the world that Dougie is involved in, I think it's such a worthwhile use of time. It feels good, and it feels right, and it feels like I'm doing something. Going back to the original thing about starting BAM, just to try and make the world a better place. It feels very, very in line with that. And, you know, when you feel good about doing something, then you know that you're doing the right thing.
I agree, because I can't even remember how I asked him on the podcast last week, but how I met Andrew as well, because what was interesting is that we have some mutual friends, and I think it was through that I saw some stuff and it looked quite cool. So I run a startup with the mission to bring free business education to the world, to help people from poor and underprivileged backgrounds, but basically anyone, regular people, access high quality business education, because otherwise, if you can't afford it, your big universities will shut the door and they don't care. But that being my background, it was almost where, you know, I wanted to be able to help people, but I saw the instant link with, I love what they were trying to do. I love the mission and the way they were trying to build the fund to fund stuff for other people. But I basically said to Andrew, look, you can have everything just for free. And for me, it's the same kind of thing, that even if only one person ever takes us up on it, it's me trying to do something. I might try and fail, but I get why you wanted to get involved.
And actually, and following up on that, it's your intent. Your intent is to put good out into the ether, and that will have a ripple effect. Going back to our earlier point, yeah, I agree. It's what Purple Sock Day is building is a virtuous circle, and it's very exciting, and I think it's going to be a massive thing, and I'm really proud to be part of it, and to, you know, one day I'll look back and think, you know, I played a part in helping that happen. So
it's a legacy thing. It's that, you know, at your funeral, what will people say? And for me, it sounds true. I come back to this every week, but I was in Cubs and Scouts, and it was, I will always do my best, do my duty to God and the Queen, and obey the Cub Scout law. But the point is that was drilled into me every Tuesday for so many years. But it's almost I don't mind if I fail. I just want to have tried my best, and then I'll get another job. I'll do something else. I'm fine with that. And I think it's almost that mentality that I don't mind doing a live stream, although it does go to 20,000 people. If nobody watches it, I'm fine with it. I actually enjoyed it. I've enjoyed today's kind of debate, which is quite interesting. So I've got to ask as well, because this is it's a hot topic that a lot of people have talked about in recent years. You became a B Corp, and it was both. What was the driver for that? How did you find the process? And almost, are you glad you did it?
Well, I have to give all the credit to our fantastic Merrin, who's our sustainability manager, and she did such an incredible job. She got us teed up for B Corp in a super quick time. I mean, it turned out that we were already doing everything pretty much that we needed to do to get B Corp certified. We just weren't taking notes of it, so to speak. We weren't logging it. And so it's quite an involved process. I think it's got more credibility than anything else out there that I'm aware of, in terms of just flagging up to consumers that, look, this is a company that cares and is doing things in a certain way. And so, because we were already doing pretty much everything, we thought, well, you know, it will help flag us up to people who may not otherwise be aware. It's another, I suppose it's a very strong tick in the box, I suppose.
It's like a kite mark. It's like a quality mark.
It is, yeah. And there's the marketing element to it, that, you know, it's like, well, we're doing all of this anyway, so why don't we just get certified? and that it was. And when I say just, it's
Yeah.
quite an involved process. But
'Cause- but with your credibility in history and supply chain and 20 years of doing this, I 100% get it. You do see some companies that don't necessarily have a supply chain or even do that much who've gone for the same certification, but I think in some ways this is a very unpopular thing to say as well. They're doing it because it's cool. And that's the thing for me, is that it's the moral intent, it's the bullshit meter between, behind, do I buy into what these guys are doing? Is it greenwashed, or are they actually putting the time, the effort, the detail? Because it's the fact, I joked with Andrew about how if you compare these to red noses that historically were always plastic, nowadays just making hundreds of millions of tons worth of plastic every year isn't necessarily the best way to go, is where these will last for years. So it's almost, there's a lot of thought even down to the cardboard packaging and stuff. It's very cool.
yeah, I mean, I think, for me personally, there was a comment we had. Our buying director is on maternity leave at the moment, and we've got Pia, who's fantastic, and she's come in and for maternity leave, and she came in for a first meeting, and we were doing I can't remember exactly what it was. It was a planning meeting about production, etc., etc. And she left, and what she said to a friend of hers afterwards was, with regard to us, and our kind of intent, and what we're trying to do in the world, and what our all of the things that we're trying to do in terms of impact positive,
Mm-hmm.
and all our footprints, and taking care of each one, if you like. She said, these guys are the real deal. They're walking the walk. They are absolutely the real deal,
Mm-hmm.
and that gives me as much satisfaction as anything else.
Yeah, I got you.
From at the time she was an outsider coming in, and that really made my year,
No, I appreciate it.
hearing that, and because it came back via a different route. So she didn't say it to come back to us, but it did come back to us, and I thought, God, that's so lovely to hear that.
I think it's what people say about you behind your back. And it is almost, it's the truth of it. But then likewise, like some people might not like me personally, but if they know that the moral intent and the content of what we do is good, and we're doing our best, I hope that, like, I don't like the guy, but it's actually pretty good. It's that kind of thing. Years ago, I went on a sales training course, and it was some obnoxious guy that sold helicopters. And I was doing a PhD at the time. And within the first 5 minutes, I was like, I hate this guy. He's horrible in every way.
Yeah.
But I couldn't deny an hour later that he knew his stuff. And I learned from him, but I still hated
Yeah.
him. But to me, it's the credibility that I still respect. Does that make sense? And it's a really funny one. That it's almost, when you're younger, you often let your emotions impact your opinion on people. As we're actually, even like, there are certain world leaders that are not popular at the moment, but I understand that for their population, they're doing the best they can, and I respect their integrity, even if I disagree with it, if that makes sense. And it's, for me, I think you need that. I think it's that kind of thing. The world's lost in some ways. It's the whole cancel culture thing, where everyone's now almost so afraid to stand up for what they actually believe in, because you might have people throw orange paint on your car or whichever, that it's just, it sounds bad, but I almost feel like the world needs a bit of a reset at some point, just to go back to more traditional values.
Well, I think, and this is why I jumped into the opportunity to kind of say my piece on climate change, is because we have to have the courage to, with kindness and with love and with good intention,
Mm-hmm.
but also with the strength to say what we believe
Mm-hmm.
in,
I get it.
because it's, the old adage, all that's required for evil to prevail is for people of good conscience to stay silent, and really that's why I bang on about the whole about that particular topic now, because I've realised we've been duped, or I was duped. I've spent tens of thousands of pounds That's not the point. We have been duped in this thing,
Yeah.
and the only way we break that spell is to talk about it, and so that's why I do.
See, the
Yeah.
most surprising thing for me in the interview was the pole vault career when that got dropped in. I didn't even want to. It was too left field. I thought I'm just going to let that one go. It'll take us off track.
Well, I mean, yeah. Well, yeah, it's a big part of my life. Yeah,
We'll
yeah.
save that for another day, maybe over a beer sometime with Dougie. But it's I think it's always good that when you meet people to have those one or two things that you remember about someone, and someone that might have known you but didn't know that now will remember that. So I think that's quite cool. So towards the end of each interview, I have a series of questions that I normally ask. Before I go into those, for you, what's the dream? What gets you out of bed every day? Where do you want to be in 5-10 years time?
I would like to set up a BAM yoga retreat in the UK that is also a centre for alternative non-pharmaceutical medicine and treatment. That is all about, as well as having a lot of fun with the yoga retreat and the Pilates retreat, to offer a service that I think is going to be popular, and it's not about money. It's about the satisfaction of doing that, and yeah, that's where I want to be going. I think there's a huge story to be told in terms of frequency and resonance, in terms of medicine, in terms of people's health.
Yeah.
Frequency, I think, is going to be a huge thing, and it's not to make money out of it. It's just to be,
because you enjoy it.
Yeah, I think.
Would you do it in Devon?
Yes.
I actually forgot that was how this conversation started, talking about consciousness and resonance. But the funny thing is, again, as an engineer, I know a lot about chemistry and physics, like more than most people. And when you drill down into atoms and quarks and everything else, essentially it's vibration. That is energy and how it moves. So in theory, there is no such thing as matter. But the point is, I don't know what it is, but I think there's something there that we just don't know yet. But I'm smart enough to kind of know that it's not just as we currently think it is, which is really interesting. So I will jump on to the last two kind of questions. I actually think for you, I have no idea where this is going to go. If you were to give advice to your younger self, and you can either pick the 31-year-old pole vaulter, the first t-shirt business, BAM, whatever you wish, the kid at school that was in the new RE block or whatever it is, art block up the wall. If you were to give advice to your younger self, what would it be?
You know what? I've because you mentioned this before, and I thought about this a lot, and I don't think I would say anything, because I wouldn't want to impact the journey that I've had, and I mean, there's in 45 minutes, there's so much that we haven't talked about that's happened, and everybody's on their journey through life, and I do suspect that everything happens for a reason, and I think I would just let it roll. I would just let it roll, because I wouldn't want to have changed anything about the journey. I think I'm learning lessons all the time, and it's just an amazing, remarkable kind of everybody's life is an amazing, remarkable journey, and and I thought there's all sorts of things that you could say to this question, but honestly, I think I would just let it roll and let the chips fall.
Because the funny thing is that the character that you become through life is built on the experience. And it's one of those things that, ironically, often the worst experiences, which could be death or trauma or whichever, often steer you into developing your character and that kind of thing. There might be that learning helps you help someone else in the future. So actually, yeah, it's going back to your point. If you were to
Mm,
remove all pain and suffering from your last 55 years or 40 years or whichever,
yeah,
you
yeah.
you wouldn't be who you are today, if that makes sense.
That's right, and I had the most profound journey that ended about 3.5 years ago. My dear wife Sue passed away from breast cancer just before the lockdowns, just before the start of COVID,
Hmm.
and that was obviously profoundly traumatic. I I wouldn't want anything to have changed. Well, obviously, her not getting cancer would have been handy, you know that that's an obvious point, but that journey was kind of, so in the end it was such a beautiful journey.
Yeah.
I don't think I would want to have changed anything in my previous life, because then I wouldn't have had that. So weird as that sounds, because it was
No, I get it.
obviously awful, but for me and for her it was
It
such
was
a
perfect.
beautiful journey. Yeah.
I love it. Um, it's just, you don't have to answer it, but it's almost you can do. What's the best piece of advice you ever had?
um that you reap what you sow, and to always remember that you reap what you sow.
Uh,
Something my mum always said as well. For everything there's a season, and if you find yourself, in a space where you're not enjoying it, or it's not how you would want it to be, for everything there's a season, and you know, this too shall pass, and
Stoicism.
yeah, I think it's mixed up in stoicism. I think you're absolutely right.
It's
Yeah, I
funny
think
though,
it's
because I
you're right.
obviously I'm always thinking about the next thing to say, and I was literally about to say that. And but
Yeah,
I
no,
think
you're
it's true.
right. You're
Yeah.
right. I hadn't picked up on that, but you're absolutely right.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
but no, you reap what you sow.
Love it. Is there anything you would like to talk about and plug before we go? And you can just do a blatant plug for these things.
I think the purple socks. I can't think of anything better to plug than the purple socks, and any time between now and Purple Sock Day, which is the 3rd of December, um, buy your purple socks. They're made from bamboo. They're incredibly comfortable, and I really hope that it builds and grows as fast as possible. And so, yeah, please go and buy some purple socks
Mhm.
from our website.
The link is on the screen, and it's also £6 for one pair or £15 for three because I checked. But no, honestly, David, I've really enjoyed today. It
Me
didn't go
too.
as I expected, but for me, that's the wonder of it. I have some of these sometimes, and they're mind numbing, because the thing that gets me is that I have to feign interest to the guest, but behind the eyes, I'm starting to die. It's actually when you don't know where it's going to go. But also because it's live, you're essentially on stage, and it's a really funny one. But for
Mm.
me, I like to. It's funny actually. With
There's a bit
this,
of jeopardy, isn't there? I mean,
I like the danger,
live.
but also,
Yeah.
but I like to talk to people like this. But in my personal life, outside of sport, I don't talk to anyone. So it's a really funny one. But I've actually really enjoyed today. I will
Yeah, me
no
too.
doubt get messages about climate change and or other. But the funny thing is, I now know which friends I can actually debate it with genuinely, and ones to just ignore. So no, cool. Honestly, I've really appreciated today. Thank you again on behalf of Andrew and the Pebble Sock Day team, just for supporting the cause. And I think it's a great cause, even though I'm not directly involved. I kind of am now.
Well,
Um,
yeah, you are, and thank you for that.
no, cool, cool. Well, have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. I'm sure we'll
You
stay in
too.
touch. And yeah, thank you for your time.
Please do. Great stuff.
All right,
Thanks
cheers.
so
Bye
much.
bye.
All
Bye
the
bye.
best. Cheers.